For many Americans, the cost of higher education makes going to college increasingly difficult. Tuition continues to rise, and the fact is there's no end in sight. Massive open online courses, or MOOCs, are entirely online, completely free, and offered by some very well-known colleges and universities. Are these MOOCs a way of democratizing the educational system? Joining me now via Skype are Kevin Kinser, Associate Professor at SUNY Albany, and Bruce Bolton, founder of Course Buffet. Thanks for being here, guys. I really appreciate Bruce, I know you're overseas and you worked long and hard to get here with us today. I want you to start off. Give us a sense of what Course Buffet actually does.
Sure. Well, it's thank you for having me, by the way. Well, it's an exciting time in online or in education, because now people in the U.S. and around the world have access to top colleges like Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and even local community colleges are putting on courses that are free, definitely say that, and open to anyone with an online internet connection. And so what we do is actually, that's the great part, but the problem is it's very random. And with any frontier, there's confusion. So what we do is bring standards. So we say, we make it easy for the user to compare apples to apples. So they know, if they want to study, macroeconomics, they know all the courses that are macroeconomics, especially, here's all the intermediate ones, here's all the introduction ones, maybe the advanced ones. And we lay it out just like you would at a college. We have the same numbering system and the same order that you would have at a traditional college. So and soon, we don't have it yet, but you'll also be able to lay out a full degree via free courses.
Okay, and now, Kevin, you study global higher education. How does this fit into what's going on just more broadly in terms of higher education, this trend of online courses, free courses?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of flux that's going on in higher education right now. A lot of people trying to figure out what the new model is. There's concern about cost, concern about access, and I think the MOOC phenomenon is something that's trying to respond to that. But let me just say one thing. I think that to say that the MOOC is giving students access to an elite education is the same thing as it's no more true than saying reading a book by a Stanford professor is giving you access to Stanford. You're getting a portion of what that education is. You're not getting the entire package. Now that might be fine, and that's an important aspect, particularly for parts of the world and for populations that don't have access to education. But it's a very different sort of education that we're providing here, one that could be very valuable, but we're still trying to figure out what the parameters of this.
Bruce, I mean, he's essentially criticizing what you guys are doing, or maybe not criticizing, but certainly putting it into some context. What's your sense of this idea that the kind of packages you guys are offering is more like education a la carte, and it doesn't really substitute for the kind of college education that is really, dialogue and about engagement on a college campus that you'd get if you sat in front of a teacher in a real classroom? Is it a lesser form?
I would, as Kevin said, obviously, if you can go to Stanford, it'd be better to go to Stanford. But that being said, I think a lot of people, it is partly what you put into it. And around with some of these courses, there are forums and there are interactions where you can kind of have back and forth. Again, is it a perfect substitute? I would say no, but it is still pretty good. Yeah. And again, just like if you're going to a brick and mortar, there are definitely students, back in my day who went to class, they weren't interacting either. So, so I would say,
I know those kids. I was sometimes one of those kids. But Kevin, you I think have called it the McDonaldization of education. But is there certainly an upside to offering education to masses of people?
Oh, well, absolutely. And I mean, again, I think the access dimension is an important part of that. And I don't want to downplay the significance of having this form of education open and accessible for free to numbers of people. In calling it McDonaldization, basically what I'm saying is it's a standardizing feature. If we're saying that there is a certain sort of education that's important, we are then duplicating that, repeating that, standardizing that, franchising that around the world, and you lose some of the variety and the diversity of education that's been part of the hallmark of the success of higher education, particularly in the United States.
So, Bruce, there's about a 95% dropout rate for the kinds of students and activity with your organization. Why is the dropout rate so high, and what can you tell us about the 5% that actually make it?
You're right. Part of it is obviously, sometimes you don't always respect things that you get for free. It takes no commitment to sign up for something that's free.
Right.
So you're less, committed to it. That being said, we're actually working on that. And part of the reason is you can't get credit right now for the most part. And we're actually working on that problem. And we're actually going to have maybe a solution of getting people more invested. But I'll have to leave that for next time when we're finished with that. But part of the reason is you can't get credit, as I said. You're kind of doing it for self-enrichment.
Right.
And you're not paying for it. But I think that will change. And just, every opportunity there's challenges, and that's certainly one of them.
Kevin, you look like you wanted to jump in and say something.
I do, actually. I mean, I want to actually defend that perspective a little bit. I think that when you're talking about enrollments of 100,000 students or more, even 5% completion is a significant amount of achievement, and we shouldn't diminish this. The scale of these efforts, I think, the M part of the MOOC, the massiveness of the MOOC, is part of what's particularly interesting here, that you have this ability to provide education at this number, even when we're not having the completions that we would anticipate in the future.
President Obama, he talked about the price of college education and the need to reduce tuition costs. Take a listen to this.
But today's skyrocketing costs price too many young people out of a higher education or saddle them with unsustainable debt. Through tax credits, grants, and better loans, we've made college more affordable for millions of students and families over the last few years. But taxpayers can't keep on subsidizing higher and higher and higher costs for higher education.
So students, I think one number is there's $1 trillion out there in terms of student loan debt, and you do have the federal government essentially subsidizing the skyrocketing costs of tuition. How can you monetize your efforts, Bruce? And I mean, what is the ultimate goal? Would people then pay to get these credits at Harvard or their local community college? Pay you?
We obviously do have some kind of monetization plan. So basically Harvard and Stanford and Yale probably are not going to give you credit. There's a couple of reasons for that. They don't want to dilute their brand. They don't want everybody to get Harvard credit, quite frankly. For them, it's more of a building of their reputation. They have a huge endowment. They don't really need the money.
Right.
That being said, there will be ways to get credit, and we're rolling that on coursebuffet.com later in the fall. But that in the future, basically higher, top education institutions and middle institutions are going to be fine, but some of the lower end institutions probably are going to get squeezed because, if you can go online from top colleges and get credit, even if it's not directly from them, at maybe a lower price point, it will probably put pressure on the lower end of the market.
Kevin, what's your sense of some of the other solutions that are being developed to address, not only this great economic income gap, but the economic gap that leads to an educational gap too? How do you get some kid who is born in West Virginia to a coal miner? How do you get that kid into college?
Well, there's a lot of strategies for that, but one of the things that I think to speak about what the MOOCs offer, they offer an alternative way of thinking about what an education is, a way of thinking about it in terms of developing a set of skills, perhaps even competencies that you can validate perhaps even outside of the traditional higher education system. Look, MOOCs can quite easily fit within the existing higher education structures through credit awards and different kinds of things like that. The real question is, can MOOCs do something to change that higher education structure, develop an alternative structure, one that allows people to take their learning, no matter where it comes from, have it validated, have it applied, have it valued in the workforce.
How disruptive do you think this could be? Is it sort of like the disruption that online news costs for newspapers, or MP3s cost for the CD and the music industry? Is that the potential we're seeing here?
Well, I mean, there's certainly the potential. I'm not sure that we're there to make that kind of prediction yet. But what we're seeing is, different sort of possibilities, I think, for what I call the deinstitutionalizing of higher education. In other words, thinking about how you do education outside of the existing institutions that make up what we call the higher education universe. How do you develop new structures, new ways of thinking about it that, in essence, bypass the credit monopoly power that existing institutions of higher education have? How do you validate that learning, make sure there's appropriate quality assurance, and then how do you finance that, whether through private or public funds?
Bruce, what is next for you?
So yeah, I was going to actually mention another thing. For some colleges, it'll definitely disrupt. But some colleges are also starting a program where you do one MOOC course or 2 MOOC courses, and then you go to a traditional college. So it's kind of like a teaser for college, maybe, if that's the way. What do we do next? Right now, as I said, we've organized all the courses so they kind of reflect what it would be like at a traditional college, so you don't have to guess. But we are moving to where we'll be able to offer you credit through partners. And so make it dead simple for somebody to start getting college credit and have it laid out for them. Because right now, as I said, it's very random, spread across different providers and different universities. But we're trying to make it dead simple on CourseBuffet.com to
standardize it a bit.
To standardize it, and for help people that may not have access. There's a lot of working adults and people who are at jobs, they can't go to a traditional college because of their schedule. So we're trying to help them achieve that. So
thank you, Bruce Bolton of Course Buffet, Kevin Kinser of University of Albany at SUNY. Thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Nina.
Thanks.